night of August 15th, 1977, nothing unusual was supposed to happen. No alarms sounded, no discoveries were announced, no astronomers rushed to their telescopes. The event that would later be called the Wow. Signal arrived quietly, unnoticed by every human being on Earth. At first, the machine that never looked directly in central Ohio, surrounded by farmland and silence, stood the Big Ear radio telescope. It was not a dish in the popular imagination. It didn't swivel or track objects. It didn't aim at the sky. Big Ear was fixed in place. The Earth rotated beneath it. As the planet turned, different regions of the sky drifted through its field of view. The telescope listened passively, collecting radio signals from deep space as they passed overhead. This made it perfect for one thing: detecting unexpected signals. The search that expected nothing. The telescope was part of a long-running SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, program at Ohio State University. The goal was not to find aliens. It was to eliminate noise. SETI researchers understood something the public often misunderstands. Space is loud, but not in the way people imagine. Most cosmic radio emissions are broad, messy spread across many frequencies. Technology, by contrast, is narrow. Artificial signals concentrate energy into tight frequency bands. Nature almost never does that. So SETI programs didn't search for messages. They searched for patterns that shouldn't exist. The data stream, Big Ear fed its observations into a computer that printed data on long sheets of continuous paper. Rows of numbers, letters, intensity values. To most people, it looked meaningless. To trained eyes, it was a map of the invisible universe. Every few days, astronomers reviewed the printouts, scanning for anomalies, signals that stood out against the constant background hiss of space. Most anomalies were explainable: satellites, aircraft, terrestrial interference. They were logged, discarded, forgotten. A single line that didn't fit sometime after the observation run. Astronomer Jerry R. Amon was reviewing the printouts. He wasn't expecting anything unusual. Then he saw it. A sequence of characters printed in one column. 6EQUJ5 to an untrained reader. It meant nothing. To Amon, it was immediate. The sequence represented signal strength over time. And it was wrong. What 6EQUJ5 meant. The characters corresponded to increasing intensity. 6 equals noticeable signal. E equals very strong Q equals stronger U equals stronger still. J equals peak 5 equals fading. This wasn't a spike. It was a smooth rise and fall. Exactly what you'd expect if a distant source passed cleanly through Big Ear's detection beam. As the Earth rotated, exactly 72 seconds long. No more, no less. Why that duration mattered? Big Ear had a fixed beam width. Because of Earth's rotation, any stationary source in space would remain in view for about 72 seconds before drifting out of range. And that's exactly how long the signal lasted. Not 10 seconds, not 5 minutes. 72. This immediately ruled out many explanations. Aircraft move too fast. Satellites don't behave this way. Local interference doesn't follow celestial timing. This signal behaved as if it came from far beyond Earth. The most unsettling detail: the signal was detected at 1420.4556 megahertz. That frequency sits extremely close to the hydrogen line, a naturally significant frequency in the universe. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in existence. Radio astronomers had long speculated, if an intelligent civilization wanted to broadcast universally, they might choose this frequency, because anyone who studies the cosmos would recognize it. Nature emits at the hydrogen line, But nature does not emit narrowband, high-intensity signals there. Technology does. The moment of realization. Eamon didn't shout. He didn't call a press conference. He did something far more human. He took a pen, and he circled the sequence. In the margin, he wrote a single word. Wow. It was not meant as a conclusion. It was an instinctive reaction. A scientist encountering something that did not fit. Why this wasn't announced? Immediately, SETI researchers were cautious. They had learned to distrust excitement. Extraordinary claims required extraordinary verification. So they did what science always does. They tried to repeat the observation. They aimed big ear at the same region of sky. They waited, and they listened. The silence. Nothing came back. No repeat signal, no weaker echo, no variation. Just the background noise of the universe. The region of sky, located near the constellation Sagittarius, passed overhead again and again. Each time, it was silent. Why this was a problem? SETI depends on repetition. One detection means nothing. 2 detections mean curiosity. 3 mean investigation. The wow. Signal was detected once. That single fact would haunt the case forever, because everything else about it was perfect. Too perfect. Early attempts to dismiss it. Researchers tried to find mundane explanations. Could it be a satellite? No known satellites transmitted there. A reflection? Wouldn't be narrowband. Military activity. No records matched. Equipment malfunction. System was stable. Nothing fit cleanly. Some explanations could account for parts of the signal. None explained all of it. Why this wasn't a hoax? This wasn't a human prank. The signal was detected by an automated system. No one knew it was happening in real time. There was no opportunity to fake it. The data existed whether anyone liked it or not. The uncomfortable position. By the late 1970s, the WOW signal occupied an awkward space. Too strong to ignore, too weak to prove, too singular to confirm. It was real data, but science had no category for it. The question that refused to go away. If it was intelligent, why only once? If it wasn't, what natural process could mimic intelligence so precisely? And if it was accidental, what does that say about how often we might miss things? A signal without context. The wow. A signal carried no information, no modulation, no pattern, no message, just energy, pure presence, as if something briefly turned on and then off. The night ends. The universe did not announce itself again. The telescope kept listening. The Earth kept turning. And the datasheet, with its circled anomaly, was filed away. At the time, no one realized that this single line of ink would become one of the most famous unresolved events in scientific history. Because it didn't prove aliens existed, it proved something far more unsettling. That the universe could produce something that looks exactly like a greeting, and then never explain itself. In science, discovery is not defined by surprise. It is defined by repetition. And this is where the wow. Signal began to fail. Not because it was weak, but because it refused to return. The first response. Listen again. Once the anomaly was identified, the response from the SETI team was immediate and methodical. They did not speculate publicly. They did not announce a breakthrough. They did what scientists always do when confronted with uncertainty. They went back to the sky. Big Ear was repositioned to monitor the same coordinates. The region near Sagittarius, where the signal had originated. The telescope listened as the Earth rotated, allowing that same slice of space to pass through its beam again. 72 seconds passed. Nothing. The sky moved on. Why once wasn't enough. A single detection, no matter how strong, cannot stand alone. SETI researchers understood this better than anyone. Signals can be reflections, interference, coincidences, equipment artifacts. The scientific method demands confirmation, and the wow signal offered none. Repeated observations. Over the following days, weeks, and months, the region was monitored repeatedly, not just by a big ear. Other radio telescopes were informed. Independent observers scanned nearby frequencies. Different instruments searched for similar characteristics. The result was always the same. Silence. Why silence made it worse? If the signal had been weak, silence would have made sense. If it had been noisy, silence would have been expected. But the wow signal was extremely strong, strong enough that if it were repeating, it should have been detected again. This led to an unsettling conclusion. Either the source transmitted once, or it transmitted rarely. Both possibilities were problematic. The fixed source assumption. The 72-second duration strongly suggested a fixed point in space. Big Ear's design meant that moving sources behaved differently. A satellite would streak, an aircraft would drift unpredictably. Terrestrial interference would not align with Earth's rotation. The wow signal rose and fell with near-perfect symmetry. That symmetry implied distance, which raised a troubling question. If the source was fixed, why didn't it transmit again? The problem with intense SETI researchers began to confront something uncomfortable. If this was an intelligent signal, it didn't behave like one. There was no repetition, no pattern, no modulation, no attempt at communication. It was not a message, it was an event, and intelligence without intent is difficult to interpret. The first natural explanations. To avoid extraordinary conclusions, researchers turned first to nature. Could it have been a previously unknown cosmic phenomenon? A rare burst from a star? A transient hydrogen cloud? These ideas were explored carefully, and they began to fail. Why stars didn't fit stars emit radio waves, but they emit them broadly. The wow signal was narrowband, concentrated in a tiny slice of the spectrum. That level of precision is almost never produced by natural astrophysical processes. Stars are messy. The wow signal was clean. The hydrogen cloud theory. Hydrogen clouds can emit at the hydrogen line. That much was true, but those emissions are weak diffuse spread over a wide frequency range. The wow signal was none of those things. It was sharply defined, and it was powerful. Terrestrial interference. Could it have come from Earth? This was one of the first questions asked, but the frequency posed a problem. The hydrogen line is protected. International agreements restrict transmissions near it. To avoid contaminating astronomical observations, there were no licensed transmitters, no known military tests, no recorded experiments, and no evidence of leakage powerful enough to mimic a cosmic source. The satellite problem. Satellites were also considered, but in 1977, few satellites transmitted at that frequency. None were positioned in that region of the sky. None matched the signal profile. And again, satellites move. The wow signal did not. The question of equipment error. Could Big Ear have malfunctioned? This possibility was examined closely. The telescope had redundant systems, stable calibration, no recorded faults at the time. Other channels did not show anomalies. Only one frequency, only one beam, only once. Equipment failure would not behave so selectively. Why two beams mattered? Big Ear used two feed horns. If a signal came from a fixed celestial source, it should appear first in one beam, then, after a brief gap, in the second. The wow signal appeared in only one. This detail troubled researchers. Some saw it as evidence against an extraterrestrial source. Others argued it could be explained by signal polarization, orientation effects, beam sensitivity differences. The data wasn't conclusive either way, which meant the question remained open. A signal without a context. As analysis continued, the wow signal took on a strange status. It was real, but it existed without context. No before, no after, no pattern. Just a momentary alignment of conditions that produced something extraordinary, and then vanished. The scientific stalemate. By the early 1980s, the case had reached a standstill. No explanation fully worked. No new data emerged. No follow-up detection occurred. The signal remained in the literature, cited cautiously, discussed reluctantly, not because scientists believed it was alien, but because they could not dismiss it. Why science doesn't like maybe? Science thrives on answers. Even wrong ones can be corrected. But maybe is corrosive. The wow signal forced scientists to admit something uncomfortable. There are events we cannot classify. Not yet, and possibly not ever. The shift in attitude over time, the tone around the wow. Signal changed. Early excitement gave way to restraint. Later discussions emphasized uncertainty, not because confidence had increased, but because time had passed without resolution. Silence again reshaped the narrative. The question that would not die. Despite the lack of evidence, one question persisted. If this was not intelligence, what was it? And if it was, why speak only once? A single data point, the most haunting aspect of the wow. Signal is also the most mundane. It is a single data point, one line on a printout, circled by a human hand. And in science, single points are dangerous. They tempt interpretation. They resist explanation. They linger, waiting for something that may never return. Big Ear continued listening. Other SETI programs followed. New telescopes came online. Technology advanced. But the wow signal never repeated. It remains alone, a statistical outlier, a cosmic question mark. What science could say and couldn't. By the end of formal analysis, scientists could say only this: the wow signal was real, unexplained, unrepeated. Anything beyond that crossed into speculation. And yet, speculation was unavoidable, because the universe had produced something that looked intentional, and then refused to clarify. By the late 1980s, the wow signal had settled into an uncomfortable category. It was no longer breaking news, but it was not resolved either. Instead, it hovered in the background of SETI discussions, resurfacing every few years, usually accompanied by the same disclaimer: unexplained, but not evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. And yet, the pressure to explain it never disappeared. Why science needed a natural answer. The stakes were high. If the wow signal had no natural explanation, then the alternative, intelligence, would demand serious consideration. And that was something most researchers were not prepared to accept without overwhelming proof. So the search for a natural cause continued. Decade after decade, the comet theory emerges. In 2017, 40 years after the signal was detected, a new hypothesis gained attention. Astronomer Antonio Paris proposed that the wow signal may have originated from a comet, specifically Comet 266P/Christensen, or Comet P/2008Y2 Gibbs. Both were in roughly the same region of the sky during Big Ear's observation. The theory was simple, elegant, and, at first glance, appealing. Why comets were a plausible candidate. Comets are not just rocks. They are surrounded by clouds of gas, including hydrogen. When a comet approaches the Sun, solar radiation causes its icy components to vaporize, forming a vast coma that can span millions of kilometers. Hydrogen is abundant in these comas, and hydrogen emits at exactly 1420 megahertz, the same frequency as the WOW signal. For the first time in decades, a natural explanation seemed to align. The follow-up observations. To test the hypothesis, Paris conducted observations of comets using radio telescopes. He reported detecting hydrogen emissions from multiple comets at or near the hydrogen line. This was significant. It demonstrated that comets could emit radio signals in the relevant frequency range. The media took notice. Headlines began to suggest the mystery had finally been solved. Why the scientific community hesitated. But within astronomy circles, enthusiasm was cautious, because plausibility is not proof, and several problems emerged almost immediately. The strength problem. The WOW signal was extraordinarily strong, much stronger than the emissions typically observed from comets. For a comet to generate a signal of that magnitude, it would have needed an unusually massive hydrogen cloud, perfect alignment, exceptional solar excitation, and even then, the numbers strained credibility. The duration problem. Comets move. Slowly, yes, but measurably. If a comet were the source, the signal should have drifted in frequency, shifted in intensity, appeared across multiple observations. The WOW signal did none of these things. It rose and fell cleanly over 72 seconds, then vanished. The repeatability problem. Perhaps the most damaging issue was this. If a comet caused the WOW signal, then similar signals should be common. Comets pass through the sky regularly. Hydrogen emissions should be detectable repeatedly. But no other WOW-like signals have ever been recorded. Not before. Not after. The two-beam issue. Returns. Once again, Big Ear's two-feed system complicated the explanation. A comet passing through the telescope's field should have been detected in both beams. The WOW signal was not. This was the same issue that had haunted every previous explanation. Criticism from SETI veterans. Several prominent SETI researchers publicly criticized the comet hypothesis, not because it was impossible, but because it did not actually match the data. It explained the frequency, but not the behavior. And in science, behavior matters more than coincidence. Why the comet theory didn't die. Despite criticism, the comet explanation never fully disappeared. Why? Because it offered something rare in this case. Closure. For many scientists, even an imperfect natural explanation was preferable to leaving the signal unexplained. Uncertainty invites speculation, and speculation invites narratives science prefers to avoid. The philosophical split. At this point, the WOW signal stopped being just a scientific problem. It became a philosophical one. Two camps emerged. Those who believed the signal must have a natural explanation, even if not yet identified. Those who believed the data allowed for the possibility of intelligence, however remote neither side could conclusively prove its case. And so, the divide remained. Why? Aliens was never the official conclusion. It's important to understand something subtle. SETI scientists did not reject the extraterrestrial hypothesis because it was ridiculous. They rejected it because it was incomplete. An intelligent signal would likely show repetition structure modulation. Intent or the WOW signal showed none of these. It was powerful but empty, loud but meaningless, and intelligence without meaning is hard to accept. The loneliest signal in SETI history. By the 2000s, the WOW signal had become an outlier. It was referenced in papers as anomalous, unconfirmed, unexplained, rarely discussed in detail, almost never revisited with new data, because there was no new data, just the same 72 seconds. The problem of a one-time transmission. One of the most disturbing possibilities remained largely unspoken. What if the signal was not meant to repeat? What if it was a beacon, or a test, or an unintended emission? Science has no framework for interpreting intent from a single data point. And so, the idea was quietly set aside. Time as an adversary. As decades passed, the chances of resolution diminished. Big Ear was dismantled in 1998. This fear is rarely spoken publicly, but it shapes decisions. Breakthrough, Listen, and modern searches. Projects like Breakthrough Listen expanded SETI scope dramatically. More bandwidth, more stars, more sensitivity. But even these modern programs prioritize long-duration observation, repeatable targets, persistent emissions, the wow. Signal does not fit neatly into this framework. It is an outlier, even by modern standards. Why follow-up failed again? Several attempts were made to re-observe the original coordinates, but space does not stand still. Stars move. Background radiation shifts. Even small errors in original data become enormous over decades. The sky, the wow. Signal came from no longer exists in the same configuration. The moment is gone. The human problem beyond technology. There was another obstacle. Psychology. Scientists are trained to distrust singular events, and rightly so. History is full of false positives. The wow. Signal arrived in the worst possible way. Once, without context, without confirmation. It demanded belief without permission. Science does not work that way. A signal that came too early. Some researchers have suggested that the wow signal may have arrived before humanity was ready. Before global networks, continuous sky monitoring, rapid verification, shared data infrastructure. If it occurred today, dozens of telescopes might catch it. In 1977, there was one, and it blinked. What if it wasn't a message at all? Another uncomfortable idea emerged quietly. What if the signal wasn't communication? What if it was leakage, a byproduct, a power transmission and navigation system? Something not designed to be heard. Human technology leaks radio waves constantly. An advanced civilization might leak far stranger things. SETI was listening for greetings, not exhaust. The failure of language. Even if the wow signal was intelligent, it contained no information, no symbols, no structure, no meaning. It was like hearing a shout in the dark with no words attached. Was it intentional or merely overheard? Science has no way to answer that. Why the signal still haunts science. Most unresolved mysteries fade. The wow signal does not, because it challenges the premise of SETI itself, that intelligence will announce itself clearly, that detection is obvious, that recognition is easy. The wow signal suggests the opposite. A warning, not a message. Some researchers now view the wow signal not as evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence, but as a warning, a demonstration of how fragile detection really is. How much depends on timing, instrumentation, interpretation, human expectation. Miss one piece, and the moment is lost forever. The silence after. There is something uniquely unsettling about a signal that never returns, not because it proves intelligence, but because it refuses closure. It leaves behind the possibility that the universe spoke once, and we didn't answer. Where the story stood by the late 2000s, the wow signal had become a case study, a cautionary tale, a legend grounded in data no longer actively investigated, but never forgotten, because it represents something deeper than aliens. It represents the limits of certainty. A question that won't go away if the wow signal happened again tomorrow. Would we recognize it, or would it vanish into noise, filtered out, discarded, ignored? That question has no comfortable answer. There is something deeply unsettling about a mystery that does not evolve. Most unresolved cases eventually do one of two things. They gain new evidence, or they collapse into irrelevance. The wow signal did neither. It remained exactly what it was on August 15th, 1977. 72 seconds of certainty, followed by decades of silence. Why silence is worse than answers. If the signal were proven to be aliens, the implications would be enormous, but at least they would be clear. If it were proven to be a comet, interference, or error, the story would end. But silence offers no ending. Silence leaves room, and room is where the mind goes. The uncomfortable math of the universe. Modern astronomy tells us something paradoxical. The universe is vast beyond comprehension, filled with billions of galaxies, each containing billions of stars, many with Earth-like planets. Statistically, intelligent life should be common, and yet we hear nothing. This contradiction has a name: the Fermi paradox, and the wow signal sits directly inside it, not as proof, but as provocation. What if the wow signal was not special, just rare? One possibility is deeply unsettling in its simplicity. What if signals like wow happen all the time, but only once per civilization? A brief technological phase, a narrow window where radio emissions leak into space, a moment that passes quickly. If so, the universe could be full of intelligence and still appear silent, because we are all missing each other by centuries, or millennia, or seconds. The problem of time. Human civilization has existed for a fraction of a cosmic second. Our radio emissions, the very thing SETI listens for, have existed for barely a century. That is nothing. If another civilization transmitted 10,000 years ago, their signal has already passed us. If they transmit 10,000 years from now, we will be gone. The wow signal may represent not proximity, but overlap, a signal from a dead civilization. There is a thought many scientists avoid saying out loud. What if the wow signal came from a civilization that no longer exists? A final emission, a technological echo, a ghost signal crossing space long after its source vanished. In that case, there would be no reply, no repetition, only aftermath. Why this possibility is so disturbing? Because it reframes the question. Not, are we alone? But, how long does intelligence last? If advanced civilizations are fragile, prone to collapse, extinction, or self-destruction, then the universe may be littered with brief flashes of intelligence, each one burning brightly, then disappearing. The wow signal could be one of those flashes. The dark forest idea. Another hypothesis casts the silence in a more ominous light. The dark forest theory suggests that intelligent civilizations deliberately remain quiet, not because they cannot communicate, but because broadcasting your location is dangerous. In a universe where survival matters, silence may be strategy. If that is true, then the wow signal may not have been a greeting. It may have been a mistake, a signal that should not have been sent. Imagine a civilization realizing, too late, that it leaked a signal, a burst of energy at the most universal frequency, a cosmic equivalent of shouting in the dark, and then silence. Not because they disappeared, but because they stopped. Why there was no message? People often ask, if it was intelligent, why didn't it contain information? But that question assumes intent. Human technology leaks powerful signals with no meaning all the time. radar, military transmissions, energy systems, meaning is not required for detection. The wow signal may have been overheard, not spoken. The loneliest interpretation. Here is perhaps the most unsettling interpretation of all. What if the wow signal was not evidence of intelligence, but evidence of how hard intelligence is to notice? What if the universe is full of activity that does not look like language, structure, or conversation? What if we are listening correctly, but interpreting incorrectly? The possibility of missed contact. There is no law of physics that says intelligent signals must be obvious, that they must repeat, that they must wait for us. The wow signal did not ask for confirmation. It did not introduce itself. It simply existed, briefly, and moved on, like something unconcerned with being understood. Why the signal still matters, even if the wow signal turns out to be completely natural. It still exposed something critical, our certainty. It showed how much confidence we place in our assumptions, how easily we define intelligence in our own image, and how quickly we dismiss anomalies that do not fit. The fear science doesn't admit. There is a quiet fear beneath all SETI research. Not that we will find something, but that we already did and didn't recognize it. A universe that does not care. The universe does not wait for understanding. It does not repeat itself for clarity. It does not ensure witnesses. The wow signal came and went, and the universe did not explain itself afterward. Why the story never ends. Most mysteries persist because of missing evidence. This one persists because of perfect evidence, with no context. The data is real. The detection is verified. The explanation is absent. That combination is rare and deeply uncomfortable. The final question. After decades of listening, refining, filtering, and scanning, after billions of dollars and millions of hours, the most haunting question is no longer, was the wow signal extraterrestrial? It is, if the universe speaks only once, are we capable of listening? The signal as a mirror. In the end, the wow signal may not be about aliens at all. It may be about us, our expectations, our limitations, our need for certainty, and our discomfort with unanswered questions. A cosmic footnote or a warning history may one day classify the wow signal as a curiosity, a coincidence, a solved anomaly, or as the first time humanity brushed against something larger and didn't know what to do with it. The silence remains. The sky has been quieter since 1977, not because nothing happened, but because nothing happened again. And that, more than anything, is what keeps the wow signal alive.